I did a first impressions video on Scarlet Nexus' demo a few weeks ago that covered some of the combat mechanics. Now that the game is finally released, I was able to fully experience one of the campaigns. I'm still going to play the second path, if only to compare Yuito's and Kasane's progression in terms of both gameplay and story. I could already tell while playing as Kasane that I wasn't getting the full picture, but playing through a single path is enough for me to explain the basic structure of the game and give a bare-bones synopsis of the plot. So what is Scarlet Nexus? Scarlet Nexus is a 2021 character action game by Bandai Namco Studios. The best way I could sum up the gameplay is if Platinum Games made a Persona. The story is set in the near future and features Yuito Sumeragi and Kasane Randall as the leads. Both are fresh recruits in the Other Suppression Force, a paramilitary team whose sole purpose is to protect humans against the threat of the Others, mysterious chimeric monsters that are comprised of organic and inorganic material. The OSF soldiers, also known as the Scarlet Guardians, use psychic powers to fight the Others. OSF platoons can share powers amongst themselves through a neural network known as SAS. I won't go too in-depth with the combat in this video, as I've already covered it when I talked about the demo, but I will correct or elaborate on some of the assumptions I had based on the demo. I said that I had a hard time getting perfect dodges in the demo because I felt like the timing was too strict. The reason for that strict timing is that one of the teammates in the game has a power that makes it easier to set up perfect dodges, and provides a follow-up attack that ensures knockdown on enemies. Also, it's actually not that hard to pull off perfect dodges without that power if you just put a little bit of practice. But that team ability does open up the timing window. Just like how the player's PK abilities are split up between the triggers, team abilities are split up between the shoulder buttons. Holding R1 and pressing any face button activates the power assigned to that button. The power stays in effect for as long as the meter surrounding the button has energy. These abilities can be considered passive because they either give the player's melee attacks an elemental effect, or change how the player moves in relation to the game world. Holding L1 and pressing any face button activates Combo Vision. A projection of the teammate mapped to that button will appear and attack the targeted enemy. Combo Vision is one of those bonuses that the player can unlock by socializing with a teammate. Combo Visions are great because they can extend your combo potential. Yuito and Kasane have basic combos at the start, and unlocking new combos in the progression screen only really extends the combo chain from 3 hits to 5. In the demo video, I talked about a hyper mode that the player automatically goes into when a specific meter fills up. I hesitated to call it a double trigger back then, and I was right to do so. There is another state that the player gets into that better fits that description. The player can only stay in this mode for a limited time because it puts a tremendous strain on the user's brain. As far as double triggers go, this is a decent one because it doesn't change up the gameplay too drastically. The player can't use team abilities, but they can still rely on their PK while under that state. The combos available while in that state are different from the combo string that Kasane and Yuito can develop in the game. Also, pressing left trigger will initiate a PK action that takes all of the debris in the field and throws it at the enemy. I said before that the combat feels very similar to a modern era Platinum title like Astral Chain, with a stop-start kind of tempo. Using PK consumes psychic energy, which can be refilled by chaining melee attacks, so the combo loop results in switching between melee and PK attacks. Heavy attacks refill more energy, but can't cancel the light attack, so it should be used to punctuate melee combos. Combo visions can be used to extend the combo chain past its hard limit, but doing so uses up the meter for that specific ability. There are moments outside of combat where you can socialize with your teammates and learn more stuff about them. The more developed your relationships become with those teammates, the more benefits you stand to gain from their contributions while in combat, like the social links in Persona. That's the game's basic premise. It gets more intricate as the plot progresses, but I can understand if people pick up the game and get put off by how closely it plays to shonen anime tropes. The cast follows from several stock character types: the stoic, the clown, the wallflower, the goblin. This is all intentional. If you feel like you're checking out of the plot in the early game, try to stick with it at least through the 3rd chapter. If it still isn't doing anything for you, then I understand if you tap out, but you're gonna miss out on one hell of a narrative roller coaster. Every time a new twist turns around the corner, I ended up looking like Travis Touchdown at the end of the first No More Heroes when he learns about the final boss's tragic backstory. The character writing is top-notch. The cast comprises of over 20 individuals, and you learn about the relationships to the leads, as well as to each other as the game progresses. The character writing may feel safe at first, but when the shit goes down, trust me, you'll know. If you're not used to characters outright stating their thoughts and motivations, you might not like the dialogue, but remember, this is a Japanese game that has an English dub. Japanese dialogue can come off more direct than English dialogue when translated, so that the foreign audience clearly understands the motivations for each character. Regarding the gameplay outside of combat, the game structure isn't that complicated compared to modern Persona titles. A Persona game will tend to chart its plot across an entire school year, with the player making the call as to which social links want to develop, by choosing to engage with characters associated with a particular link. The player can also choose when to go into the dungeon and when to skip it in order to complete another task, but every choice made will cause time to pass, so there's always a sense of forward momentum in the game's pacing. Scarlet Nexus' structure breaks its plot down into discrete chapters. When you're on the field, you can go to the intended location on the world map to push a plot along, or explore previously visited spots to either grind or complete side quests. Between these sections are intermissions where the team will return to the hideout. This is where the social aspect of the game comes into play. The game won't progress until the player chooses to end the intermission. This allows the player to engage with as many teammates as they choose to at the hideout at their leisure. It's not a question of time management, but rather a question of whether you want to play more of the game to get more out of it. The other thing about social links in Persona is that they provide instances where the player makes dialogue choices that determine whether his bond with a certain link improves or worsens. Scarlet Nexus kind of does that. Most bond moments are vignettes between the player and a given character that play out without any input. However, certain characters have moments where the player needs to help them fend off others for story reasons. The other way that players can engage with their teammates is to provide them with gifts. The shop in the game allows the player to either purchase gifts or trade them with enemy drops. It reminds me of the gift system in Onimusha 2 of all things.
This is all mine! Thank you so much!
This shop also provides the player with consumable items, equipment, attachments that improve stats, and cosmetics. It's also where the player can save manually. So why do I think Scarlet Nexus is worth playing? For one thing, this is a game coming from a studio that's not known for character action games. That alone caught my attention. More importantly, there is so much detail packed into this title in its visuals and world building. Scarlet Nexus nails a futuristic anime city aesthetic down, with its use of holographic neon signs that coat all over the city exteriors. You'll know exactly what kind of environment you're in at any given time. Moreover, the objects that decorate these levels serve two purposes. On a mechanical level, they're ammo for the player's PK abilities. Anything that isn't bolted onto the ground or wall is fair game for Yuito and Kasane. On an aesthetic level, the kinds of objects that are found in a given level fit with the theme of that level. The construction yard has dump trucks, piles of steel beams, and crane hooks that the player can use to obliterate enemies. The highway has cement blockades and drums of water. The city levels have vending machines and electrical poles. Sometimes the game provides gimmick objects that have really clever interactions if you use PK on them. If you can get the enemies to group around the oil trucks on the highway, you can detonate the truck and clear out the arena. Activating the subway trains allows for a quick way of destroying hordes of others if you can get them to stand on the tracks. The highway has buses that you can ride on and mow down swaths of others if you can catch them in your path. Later levels have objects that Yuito and Kasane can surf on to style on these fools like Nero when he's riding on Punchline. The levels also have obstacles that require the player to rely on their teammates' abilities to pass. You can use electricity to power up shutter doors, or teleport through certain fences. Some doors have security cameras that will trigger if the player gets too close. You can use invisibility to get past these doors undetected, or activate the Speed Force to outrun the locks. You can actually see the door locks activate as you run past them. The attention to detail is also evident in the cosmetics you can give to your team. You know how most games will tend to have cutscenes where a character will be in their default outfit, despite the fact that you customize their look? That's not the case with Scarlet Nexus. Whenever the game has to load between new areas, the loading screen will change based on which characters are in the player's party. If that weren't enough, their silhouettes change depending on their cosmetics. They always show up on the characters with barely any exceptions, from the motion comic segments to the full motion cutscenes. One of the guys in the game looks and acts like Dwight Schrute from The Office, so naturally I made him a Catboy. I said in the demo that the game seemed to know when to switch from full motion comic to cutscenes, and that stayed true in the full game. I'll admit that some moments could have had better impact if they were fully cinematic, but those were few and far between, And the game really did capture the important stuff. Even just seeing the characters interact at the hideout became a showcase for the game's attention to detail. The characters will move around in the hideout and do different things based on their position. Some could be sitting at the dining table, or reading a book in the lounge, or working out in the gym. Each character gets their own little part of the hideout to decorate, which will fill up with the gifts you give that character. Sometimes a character can be seen interacting with the gift you gave them, and these interactions provide more insight into each character's personality. I got this little dude a set of weights, and he immediately started pumping with them. I'm not used to having a character action game with this amount of detail put into it. By the end of the game, I had a very clear picture on what each character was like and what motivated them to fight. You get to learn about your team at the same pace as Yuito and Kasane. Interacting with your buddies can result in getting text messages to which you can reply. And something really cool that I like is that the game changes the amount and the pace of your buddies' replies based on their personality traits and the subject matter. The really chatty girl of the team just carpet bombs you with text replies, while the more reserved members keep it short and sweet. I'd be selling the game short if I describe its plot as intricate. I won't go into detail about it, but just know that this game has the rawest display of the power of friendship I've ever seen. Along with that, there's a part of the game where the entire team needs to use all of their skills in order to rescue someone, and it's crazy to see how the writing accounts for practically every character in the 10-man squad. The other cool thing about the characters is that, because the cast is all part of the same squad, there are instances where the player might end up fighting some of them due to plot reasons. Because each character has the same gear as the player, they can also go into sicko mode, which means that anyone could potentially become a boss fight at any given time. So does Scarlet Nexus have any problems? Yeah, there's a few. One of the more important aspects to Capcom's and Platinum's combat in their character action games is that their enemies tend to be less aggressive if they're not in the player's camera. Enemies in Scarlet Nexus do not respect that rule, and will often attack on screen. It can get really bad if all of the projectile enemies shoot their shots off consecutively off camera. You can recover from these attacks, but just be aware that it can and likely will happen. Some enemies require very specific strategies before you can deal damage. Although the game usually provides a few methods to attack each enemy, you have to be mindful of which ability is active or inactive during combat to plan your approach. Managing your team abilities can be hectic during combat, and I could see someone getting overwhelmed at micromanaging every moving part while enemies are attacking. When you're in combat, you'll have two of your teammates on the field to help you out. Their AI depends on what commands you've set for them in the menu. Although they can pull their weight during combat, they can also be susceptible to enemy attacks and will require some babysitting if their health gets too low. If they lose all of their health in the fight, they'll go down, and you or the other AI teammate needs to revive that character. The thing is, the only way to apply items during combat is either for the player's individual use, or as a use for the entire team. I don't know if there's a way to apply the single-use items to another teammate, but it just feels like a waste to use a group heal because one of your characters is squishier than the rest. Because the game's plot is split between two lead characters, there are some details that feel like they were abandoned or weren't fully developed if you only play a single path. I know for a fact that two characters in Kasane's path just disappear after a specific moment, so I'm hoping to get some closure on what happened to them on Yuito's path. Also, if it wasn't clear at the outset, you're going to be bombarded with in-game vocabulary at the very beginning, with names and concepts just thrown at you. It can feel a little daunting to take it all in, but after a while it all starts making sense. If you're starting to lose track of the plot, use the game's library in the menu to refresh your knowledge on the different factions and technology. Keep a notebook handy if you need help keeping track of every single relationship in the game. I don't want to scare you into thinking that you have to do homework to understand this game's plot, but I promise you that understanding these kinds of things early on pays off as the plot develops. I get the feeling that some people may find it awkward for the game to have characters that oppose a player at certain plot points, only to have bonding moments with those same characters during those periods. But the game is pretty clear in pointing out that no one really wants to fight each other, and they're only forced to because of their allegiances with their respective factions. It's like when kids are friends despite knowing that their parents hate each other's guts. When I set up the groups in my Steam library, I made a distinction between the games I finished, the games I played but didn't stick to and plan on trying again sometime in the future, and the games I don't ever plan on ever trying again. But I also have a group marked Absolute Kino, which is effectively a glorified list of favorites. I put Scarlet Nexus in that group. Character action games are rare because it's such a specialized genre. If the combat doesn't feel engaging, then the entire game falls apart. And even if the combat does feel good, there may be aspects to the plot or set pieces that throw a wrench in the game's pacing, so that you have to concede whenever talking about how good that game is. I don't have any of those issues with Scarlet Nexus. I can see someone saying that the game picks up way too slowly, or feels like it's way too long for a character action game, but that all depends on personal preferences. Character action games usually clock in at around the 10-hour mark, and Steam tells me that I've put in just shy of 40 hours into Scarlet Nexus. So that's about 4 times the amount of content I'm expected to see in a single run of the game, and this game offers 2 different perspectives. As for pacing, the game does a great job gradually introducing new concepts as the fights progress. By the endgame, you're managing several different meters and selecting multiple restoratives, while juggling an enemy in combat. I've only ever seen a single set piece in the game come out of left field, but it did a great job explaining what I had to do before throwing me in and didn't outstay its welcome. We got something special here. This is a strong example of the character action genre, coming from a studio that hasn't done anything prior in the field. The God Eater series are more like Monster Hunter games, and Code Vein plays more like Dark Souls. I want to see more of this stuff from Bandai Namco Studios. I don't know if I need more from this world because I was satisfied with how everything turned out in the end, but I want to see if the studio can carve out its own niche in the character action genre. Seeing games like Scarlet Nexus, the Nier Replicant re-something, and No More Heroes 3 released in 2021, and even seeing the Ninja Gaiden series brought to modern systems despite their absolute dog shit remastering, makes me really happy to be a fan of character action games. I guess I really only have one more thing to say. Please play Scarlet Nexus.